Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome back to Live Well, Dream Big. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. You know, now more than ever, people are facing burnout in their careers. The last year plus has created so much stress and anxiety for people across the globe, really, who are now rethinking how they want to work, where they want to work, and really how they want to live. Maybe you're one of them. We keep hearing about the Great Resignation and how people are leaving their day jobs in droves, getting out from behind their cubicles and saying, you know what? This isn't for me anymore. Now's the time to do something I love, to do something that matters, to make a difference, and I'm going to make a change with my career. And nurses are one of those groups of people that are experiencing this type of burnout. In today's episode, it's the second in a two-part series on nurse burnout. I'm talking with Sandra Payne, who is a nurse turned holistic wellness coach. And Sandra knows just how nurses are suffering, many from depression and anxiety, as they live and work amidst what she calls a mental health crisis in nursing. Sandra's going to share her story as well as her strategies for avoiding burnout and living a life we love. So thanks for being here and thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode, Nurse Burnout, part 2 in a two-part series. Whether you're a nurse or not, I think you're going to find today's episode both interesting and enlightening, really, as we explore burnout. So many people are facing it today, especially in their careers. We're talking about the Great Resignation, the work-from-home revolution. People are really fed up. They want to do something different. They want to live life on their own terms, and they're really experiencing different levels of stress and anxiety in their current careers and positions. And that's why I'm excited today to be here with one of our very own certified holistic wellness coaches, Sandra Payne. Sandra is not only a wellness coach with the IAWP, but she's a nurse. And today she's going to talk about her journey from nursing to holistic wellness coaching. But Sandra has a very unique understanding of the incredible challenges that nurses and healthcare providers are facing today and really every day, and the effects of these challenges that they're having on really every aspect of their lives. As a coach, she focuses on an approach to all aspects of health and wellness that address the person as a whole. And her goal is to help nurses create happy, passionate, healthy lives that they love to wake up to today. And her Nurse RX program has helped nurses everywhere manage stress, find support, gain confidence, and really stand up for what they believe in. Hey, Sandra, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so always so strange to be introduced, but really, I'm so grateful to be here and really honored to have this opportunity to share part of my story, but also just maybe inspire some hope in anybody who's listening too. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you're here. And I've got to hear a little bit about your story, being in connection with you, especially over the past year. And I find it so fascinating, really. And I think maybe it's a really good place to start. Why don't you tell us a little bit just kind of about your story and your journey? You know, you were a nurse, you decided to become a wellness coach. Like, walk us through it a little bit and give us a little background, especially for those who don't know you as well.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, how much time do you have?
Right.
Because there's, everybody's story is long and deep. I've been a nurse for 15 years, a registered nurse, which I'm going to put this out there right now. I'm probably not renewing my license next year. So I'm putting it out there because it's a big deal. So I'm going to drop that right there. But I've been a nurse for 15 years and I worked in multiple different areas and found myself really early on burnt out. And when I mean burnt out is just like, one of my clients calls it her care meter. It was at an all-time low. And I just really love that because that's how I felt really early on. Just I started to detach from the work and I started to become really irritable with things and frustrated and just kind of like, apathetic, like this, nothing we do makes any difference. Nobody's listening. Nobody wants to make any changes. And then I was confronted with a couple patient scenarios that really left me quite traumatized. And so I left that work environment looking for something new, thinking that a new work area would solve my problems, which a lot of us do, right? If it's feeling like it's really overwhelming and things are not going well, we look to get out. And so I kind of think that's the flight response. So I did. I left and I found a new job. And as a nurse in 15 years, I've had 9 different jobs. So that can maybe paint you a picture of the fact that I never found something that was completely ticking all of my boxes and helping me really be fulfilled and feel like I was making a difference. Every role I took, there was good parts, but there was also, this real significant piece that felt misaligned. And it was what I discovered over the last 6 years, roughly, is just that I felt like I could be doing so much more for people and was not being given the resources or the time, the respect in order to do it. And I call it, I always talk about it the way of like, they want to put you in a box. They want to put you in a box. You do it this way. This is how we do it. Don't ask questions. And right from the start, in nursing school, I was the kind of person who asked questions and who, bucked the system and kind of ruffled feathers. And that puts a target on your back. And so I think throughout my nursing career, I tried to stay in the background as much as possible, but for me, it was really hard because that's just not my personality. And I would say I am a change maker, and I would go into new work environments and be like asking questions. Why are we doing it this way? Why don't we try this? And just the system doesn't really like that. And so I found myself very, what I call now, like morally distressed. It was, I knew I could be doing more, but I was not being allowed to. And that kind of was the tipping point for me. After my last child was born, he's going to be 4 soon, but I was faced with coming back from mat leave and do I go back or don't I? And I had already started on, this more holistic wellness path in my own life and had really made massive steps as far as changing things in my lifestyle so that I could be more healthy. I have experienced depression and anxiety for most of my life, and nursing made that significantly worse. So I'd made so many changes, and then knowing that I was faced to go back, everything in me was saying no. Like just the thought of going back, it was just like this. I wanted to be sick. Like everything in my body was saying that this was not the right choice for me. And so I made that really terrifying step and quit my position. And I wasn't even bedside, 12-hour shifts. That probably would have been a lot easier to leave. I was working like 5 hours a day, Monday to Thursday job as a team lead in a clinic. But it was so, I knew going back into that environment, I'd be faced with the same things. It's like, we want to do so much for people. We want to help people. We see them where they're at and how they're suffering and how much care they need, and how much we know we could give, but are not allowed to. And I just couldn't do it. And coaching kept falling into my lap. So I was like, it's time to make a change. And so I did. And as scary as that was, it was ultimately the best decision I could have made.
Wow. In many ways, we're talking to nurses today. We're kind of talking about nurse burnout, but your story also kind of resonates with, I think, people everywhere, right? Who are just experiencing many of the same things you did, where they're feeling like they're being put in a box. Their demands on them are so high, and then it's not aligning with, their own values and their own morals, or just really what they want to do with their life. And what I love about your story, Sandra, is that you kind of kept trying, though. You switched jobs so many times. Sometimes people just stay stuck and frozen, and they're like, this is it. There was something within you where you're like, okay, I'm going to keep going on. You kept switching and until you really, really found it, which is, I think really, really a big, huge thing to be doing. So burnout, let's kind of get into it. What would you say is exactly nurse burnout? Sometimes we talk about burnout specifically, but I know when you talk about it with nurses, they're experiencing some things that maybe are different from the rest of the world. How would you define it?
Well, there's like a official definition that you can look at that kind of lays out 3 criteria, but it is this sort of disconnection, this apathy, this like kind of giving up attitude that happens. It is also emotional overwhelm. And I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces for nurses. You can't work literally every well, maybe not every role, but most roles as a nurse, you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people in some of their darkest, most difficult times, and sometimes witnessing the worst of humanity. And that's hard. And so I feel like, the emotional overwhelm that happens when we are continually exposed to these really traumatic things and not given the space or the time or, again, I'll say the respect that we deserve to process that, it builds up. And so many, I think one of the biggest challenges with nursing is that there is such a stigma as far as how you're supposed to be. And so, even when I was, doing traditional nursing, it was like, you have to be strong, right? You can't let it bug you. You have to just keep going. There was no real support given to people having emotions, to people being people. And these nurses are going through this every single day. And right now we're in, I can't remember what you called it in the beginning there. You gave it a really clever
the Great Resignation.
The greatness. Yeah. And yeah, that was it. And it's, we are literally in the middle of that. We are in a crisis right now in healthcare. I think the world needs to open their eyes to that because we are in a crisis. The amount of nurses who are burnt out and on leave right now, suffering psychological injury, PTSD, and the number of nurses who are wanting to leave it's huge. And we are already in a really short environment. And that kind of environment, when you're working, without the resources that you need to do your job effectively, but also with this extremely high bar that you're expected to meet, it's that struggle is exhausting. And so people are showing up, to do their jobs to the best of their abilities, but the rest of their life is suffering because they're giving everything that they can to meet this ridiculous expectation in an environment that's not supporting them. And then going home and it's like, I got nothing left to give. Their relationships struggle, their parenting, their ability to nourish themselves and to care for themselves. It's extremely exhausting and overwhelming to be in this environment right now. So it's, yeah. What's unique to nursing, I think it's the human aspect, the fact that we are dealing with people in some of the most difficult times and not given the space or the respect to process that.
Well, I think that's such a huge point. When I hear this story about nurses and like what they're going through on a day-to-day basis, I think so many people are facing burnout. But then when you think about it from this perspective, the very people that are supposed to be caring for other people that are supposed to be, really focused on health and wellness are not being supported themselves. So it's such an irony, really. It's almost like mind blowing. And I'm sure so many nurses are listening to this going, yep, that's exactly how it is. But for people on the outside, maybe who aren't nurses, it's almost hard to imagine that this is actually even possible.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I think also part of that is that we don't talk about it because we're not out there looking for atta-girls. Like we're not out there looking for recognition. We're just trying to do the best job that we can with the minimal and limited support and resources that we're given. And so we're not out there looking for, some kind of sympathy or anything like that. And so we don't talk about it. It's also very frowned upon to talk about it. So it's, when we speak outside of the, maybe what nursing wants us to portray it as, it comes with its risk because there is pretty significant I almost want to say rules around what you can and can't say. And they want us to paint nursing in a certain light, and it's not the reality. And so I think people do need to be aware of what is happening. And it is kind of mind blowing that there are people in this profession, and I would say probably the majority, who have the most, like the greatest advice to give people, right? Like if anybody came to a nurse and said, I'm struggling with this, she would be like, you need to take some time off. Like you need to look after yourself. You need to do, but yet for ourselves, it's like next to impossible to take our own advice. So.
Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you say that, like, this isn't something that, is encouraged. You can't really talk about this stress. It almost sounds like there's this silencing going on, as you mentioned. And I'm just curious now, as we're talking, it just occurs to me, like, what's it like for you? You're still a nurse, but you obviously have left nursing to actually be like coming out with this voice versus the times that you were silenced. I mean, that's gotta be, what is that like?
For the most part, it's terrifying. Seriously, because actually getting into this work, it was, there was a coach I was working with, and she was really encouraging me to work with nurses. And I was like, I don't want to work with nurses. Like you don't understand the environment that is. And kind of like some of the toxic personalities that are in there, and the bullying and all of it. Like, and so she was like, it can't be that bad. Right. And I'm like, no, like until you're in it, you don't know. But I think the public doesn't have a good awareness of that because we don't talk about it. I would say we are silenced, and, it's kind of the purpose of why I created the podcast that I do, which is called Endless Silence. And it's about nurses sharing their stories. It's not about shaming the profession. It's about telling our truth and, owning our story, because if we can't, then it just eats us apart. And then we feel really isolated in what we're going through. So having that community and sharing those stories, I think, has been a really huge healing for people.
Wow. I'm like getting goosebumps as you're talking about just this idea of ending the silence and allowing people to have that space and the community that you've created for them to share their stories. Like that's so huge, right? Because it's not happening for them within their current structures. Tell us a little bit more. I mean, like you've shared your story, what was life like for you when you were a nurse, or how did you eventually come to hit this rock bottom burnout moment? Was it like a series of things that happened? Was it one moment, you're just like, this is it? I mean, tell us a little more.
It definitely was a series. I didn't have one big specific event that happened. And like I said, I dealt with depression for so much of my life, but I was in a place of like real surrender, but not in a good way. It wasn't like I surrender, I trust. It was like I surrender, I give up. And I was thinking that, this is just the way it's supposed to be. Like I had ticked all the boxes that they had told me I needed to tick in my life, and things just felt flat. And, I was miserable. I was waking up dreading going to do whatever. And I mean, I had everything that I thought I wanted, and I'm not trying to, dismiss everything I do have, or, sound ungrateful, because that's definitely something women, want to make sure that people know we are grateful for everything that we have. But at the same time, I was looking around thinking like, this is it. Like, this is life. This is how I'm supposed to live the rest of my life. And so that was, when I spoke about that, though, that was the biggest turning point for me, because there was so much shame and guilt attached to feeling that way that I wasn't honest about it. I was just like, this is what it is. I'm just going to have to feel like, shit for the rest of my life. And, but when I finally told somebody about it, about how I was feeling, it was like a doorway opened. There's that saying, like, the truth will set you free. It literally does set you free. And so that's something that I talk about all the time with nurses, is like, let's be honest about how you're feeling, instead of trying to just stuff it down and feel bad about it and eat it away. Literally it's eating you away, but also we eat it away. And instead of doing that, let's talk about it. Let's just really give it some airtime, because I do find that once that truth hits the air, it kind of loses its power. And it opens up doorways for us to start looking at things in a different way. And I would say that was like one of the most pivotal moments in my own healing journey, was really owning how I was feeling. And because it just allowed me to see, things differently. I don't know. It's kind of magical the way that happens, but.
Yeah. And I love how you said, when you finally talked to somebody about it, it changed everything for you. I mean, I think that's so huge. So we've been talking about some of the challenges that nurses are facing. Obviously, the stress, the anxiety can be leading to depression, feeling silenced. Are there any other things that are going on in the day-to-day challenges specifically that they're facing right now?
I mean, specifically, if you talk to nurses, the challenges are like the short staff, going in and feeling like you're unsafe to practice because you don't have the support that you need. There are nurses going in and they're looking after 35 patients, like on their own, with maybe one care aide to help them. It's unsafe for those patients. It's also unsafe for that nurse and her license. And there's you go into this, and they set you up in school to be afraid of losing your license. Like there is, if you do anything that's wrong, you could lose your license. You could be disciplined. You could be da, da, da. So if you're going into a situation like that, where it's unsafe, it's like, how am I going to possibly look at if something goes wrong? What am I going to do? Like if one patient turns, what am I going to do? There's 35 other people or 30, whatever to look after. So I mean, if you talk to nurses, I think that's the primary thing that's really at the front of it. But when you start to peel back the layers, that's really just the surface problem. It's the buildup that's been happening over time. And I mean, COVID has, I think, pushed it all to the surface. It's like, this has been going on for years and years and years. We've been fighting and struggling and asking for more and asking for more. And we just continually get shut down. And now it's just, everything's at the forefront. So many nurses are just like throwing in the towel, saying, I'm done. I can't do this anymore, taking leave, or just quitting and looking for something else. So, I think when we pull it back, it's the trauma, it's the emotional overwhelm. It's the fear that lives in this profession.
Mm. So you've got this fear, you've got this stress and anxiety, you have no real outlet. And you mentioned, kind of indicated this a little bit before, then you come home and you're like, I have nothing left to give, right? So how does this actually show up for the nurse when she does go back home, or she leaves her environment? How does it actually impact her own wellness, her life? Like what does that look like then?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the nursing environment, it creates a ton of self-doubt, and it creates a lot of fear of failure or fear of making errors. And so you're essentially walking around in fight or flight all day. What's the next stress coming? How am I going to handle it? Like, it's just this constant tense pressure. And then you go home and you've just given everything literally, in that sometimes 12, 13, 14 hours that you're there. And then you come home, and a lot of us, I mean, it's primarily women in this industry. And so we are, sometimes with young families at home, and then these kids are wanting, and your spouse is maybe wanting from you. And so the relationships, I think, really struggle. A lot of us are holding guilt and shame again, around how we're parenting, because we know we could be doing more. So we're morally distressed at work because we know we could be doing more, and we're morally distressed at home because we know we could be doing better and more for our families. But it's like, I mean, you can't give from an empty cup, right? And if there's no space and there's no way to really, not even just space, but energy to refill, and to refuel yourself, then there really is. It's just so hard to just constantly be giving and not have anything come back to you. So, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest impacts, but the mental health is really profound. These feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, feeling alone, having this apathy and this disconnection, just wanting to sleep all the time. Even taking pills to try to sleep, or pills to try to numb things out, turning to really, unhealthy choices to try to numb and to turn off the pain and everything that's going on inside of them. So it's food choices, it's alcohol, it's drugs sometimes, the substance abuse disorders in nursing are higher than the general public. Suicide rates are higher than the general public. It's the ripple effect of what happens, and what is specifically happening right now in this crisis we are in it's massive, and it's affecting every aspect of their lives. There was one nurse that shared in my group, and she was saying that when her husband, it was actually from her husband, and he said, every time I drop her off at the doors of the hospital, that's going to make me emotional to saying it. But every time I drop her off at the hospital, I cry because I know I'm losing a part of her when she comes back.
Oh my gosh, that is so emotional, right? Because it just paints a real picture. You're going in, you're just giving everything, you're being totally depleted. And then this idea of coming back into your space where maybe you could find some rejuvenation, but it's not possible, because it's just a vicious cycle. And then the guilt, as you described, where now you really can't give to your family or be there for them in the way that they want. And Wow. It's just, it seems like, gosh, it feels like this. I think this is true in any sort of crisis. Like it feels that sometimes like there's no way out, right? But
Mhm.
many nurses, as you said, they're leaving. They're finding a way out. Though some are probably feeling really stuck right now. They might be listening to this thinking, okay, like that all sounds great, but I can't leave my job. What really is stopping nurses from making a change, from either getting out, even though we are seeing that, or from raising their hands within the structure and saying, this has to stop. We're not doing this anymore. We need to be supported. I mean, what do you see stopping them from either speaking up or making a change and really changing things?
I think that there are a lot of people that do speak up. But what happens over time when you're continually asking and speaking and no one's listening and they just keep shutting you down is you develop this learned helplessness, right? Where it's just like, there's no point. There's no point. So they just are stuck in this victim mode where they just are, they literally feel very stuck. I think a big portion of people don't leave because of the investment that they've made. I mean, they went to school through one of the most grueling post-secondary educations that you can go through. You financially, you're in a hole. You've given everything. And we come into this, with kind of, I teach nursing students just as a private thing, but I see them coming in and they're just, they're wide-eyed. They're so excited and they're so like, they can't wait to be a part of this. And a part of me is like, oh, because I know what's going to happen over time is that it's all going to fade. It's all going to fade. It's going to be clouded over that excitement, because the reality is that it's not glamorous in any way. So I kind of forgot your question. Sorry, but
I'm not really sure. I think it's just more about, what's really stopping them from making a change. And you're really painting a picture here. I mean, you decided to make a change. You said, and you sounded like somebody who was like, okay, I'm going to keep seeking. I'm going to find something. Was there like kind of a trigger or light bulb moment when you finally decided to do something? I ask you this because I think, okay, for nurses who might be listening today, maybe hearing that moment, they're like, wow, I just had that moment, and that could inspire them. But I'm just curious, was there any specific moment?
Yeah. I think back to when I first left, I started in the NICU. And so 4 years into that of full time, and that's where those traumatic incidents happened. And I recognized in myself that I just was not doing well. So it does take some aspect of self-awareness, right? And some honesty too. And I thought, what, nursing has so many different options. I'm new, like I'm still relatively new. So I took the leap and I tried to find something else. And I took the first thing I could get and left. And the problem with leaving is that the problems follow you. So even though, the environment was different, it was much more healthy for me because it was a regular schedule and it didn't have all those other pieces, but the trauma that I had experienced was not gone. It was still there. So I think, sometimes when we think about leaving, a lot of nurses too feel like they've been in this area for a long time and they have such doubt about themselves that how could I do anything else? Like, sometimes we're in our 40s or our 50s and it's like, how could I leave now and go start something new? They're so boxed in and they're so like conditioned to believe that they can't do anything else, that there isn't, it doesn't feel possible for them. So, I feel like also when I chose to leave and go to all those different jobs, I was looking for something, and I don't regret any of those moves because they taught me things every step of the way. So, I mean, a part of what I do is really, it's not about telling people to leave because people are already thinking that. So it's more about like building our confidence and our trust in ourselves to listen to what our body is telling us and to make choices from that place and to make choices from a place that's right for us. And I don't know if I just had some kind of intuitive guidance. I think maybe that helped me to find these different pieces, but a part of me knew that there was something more. a part of me just was this tiny whisper that was clouded with a ton of doubt and a ton of like really awful negative thinking. But there was this tiny whisper that was like, there's something more. And so it just, I don't know, I really don't have an answer as far as like what created the impulse to listen to that. But every time I do, it always leads me in the right direction. So I don't regret any of those choices for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was that doubt, but there was also that tiny whisper. Did that make making the change like scary, or did it make it exciting? I mean, there's always that moment where you kind of just go for it. Maybe it's exhilarating, but then you're like, okay, wait, what just happened?
Yeah. Like switching jobs, I personally just never felt scared. I was like excited. I was, what's next? I think I also get bored really easy too. So I was always kind of looking just what could be next. But I don't feel like I was scared, but I know that a lot of nurses are scared. I know that a lot of nurses are thinking about like, if I leave, like, how do I go into a new environment? Like, I've only ever worked with this. How do I change? And it's like, just building that confidence, I think, is a really big piece, because we just get so slap down. And honestly, I relate the healthcare system and nursing to like an abusive relationship. And over time, you get so beaten down that you just don't think there's an option, right? Just as if you were thinking about an abusive relationship between two people, that person becomes like, there's no other option. Like they feel so hopeless and so helpless that they can't see outside of what they're in. And so a part of, what I'm doing is just helping people see a wider view, and like that there is possibility. I mean, 80% of nurses in a survey they did last year are thinking about leaving. So and that means going to a new job, but there's a significant portion of them who are just ready to like hang up their license altogether and just be done with this. So it affects us all. It affects every single nurse. If all these nurses are leaving, the ones left are going to be impacted. It affects us as patients and users of the healthcare system too. So it's such a critical place we're in right now.
Yeah. And that's why I think this is such an important conversation we're having today, because you can be listening to this thinking, okay, I'm not a nurse. Maybe I'm learning some about burnout or what it's like, or I'm getting a perspective into nursing. But the truth is, most people use traditional healthcare in one form or another at some point in their life, right? These are people that are in our communities. These are people that are supposed to be out there supporting us. And yet, they're not being supported. So I think it is really an awareness piece for everyone. And I think everything you're doing is really helping to bring that to the forefront. So I'm curious though, because you kind of painted this picture about like what it was like, right, for you, and of course what it's like for many nurses who are really struggling today. You're kind of on the other side now, which is very exciting. You had to have that moment. You went through it. You maybe had some ups and downs along the way, but paint a new picture now. What is it like kind of on the other side as someone who decided to leave and like go for your passion, and now here you are doing what you love every day?
It's not been easy. I just in making that initial decision to leave my, what I call my gravy job, because it really was, with all the benefits, everything, it was really hard to walk away from that, because I have a young family. My husband is self-employed. So there's a lot of like, there's good pieces, but there's also insecurity somewhat in that. And so walking away was very difficult. But I have to say, even though it was hard, I had also been doing a lot of work on myself up to that point. So I think if I had been, if it had been 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been in a place to be able to make that choice. And so I think it does take us really looking at ourselves and healing and going through all of the self-growth and discovery in order to come to a place where we can look fear in the face and say, yeah, but this is right. I'm going to do it anyways. There's a quote that I just love. And it was like, jump and grow wings on the way down. And I follow that. I feel fear all the time. I feel uncertainty. I feel doubt. I feel like, who the hell am I to do this work? Like, how am I going to possibly make any kind of impact? I'm just one little person who, for most of my life thought I was nothing, like thought I was absolutely insignificant. So there's still a lot of that shows up, but I also feel like I come back to that quote over and over, because I'm just like, just go for it. Like, what do you got to lose? I'm sorry if I'm not answering the question.
You're right on.
There is this, there's a book, I think stories of the death and dying. I can't remember exactly, but I'll share it with you after. And it's written by a palliative care nurse, and she surveyed people in their end of life and about their regrets. And the number one regret was that they didn't live life on their own terms. And when I read that, I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be, on my last days, whenever that's coming, I don't want to be like, I should have just gone for it. Like, I should have just done that, because we only get this one shot. And so those kinds of things really have stuck with me and have become like these lifelines when I'm feeling all this doubt and everything that comes clouding over me. I'm just like, go for it. This is your shot. Like, this is, and it's taken me a lot of work to get here. Like, I don't dance around the reality that this kind of self-work is really hard. It's hard, and it's messy, and it's painful, but I believe that we all owe it to ourselves to do this kind of work so that we can feel like when we're, in our last days, that we have done everything that we wanted to do, that we lived life the way we wanted to live it. I think it's just so important. I want that for everyone.
I think you said something really important there. I just want to touch on this whole idea of this self-awareness work, of doing the self-work, the mindset work, the inner work, whatever you want to call it. I think it's huge that you mentioned that, because someone might be listening today thinking, okay, I'm just going to go cold turkey. And that's great, fine. But on the other hand, no matter whether you do it before or after, you have to go on the self-awareness journey that you're talking about. And I love how you said, like, it's going to help you along the way. It's going to be there to really support you when the doubts come in. But if you just go for it, but you don't change anything about your own mindset or your awareness, I'm assuming it's going to be a much more challenging journey.
Yeah, I kind of reflected as like, when we come to a place where I think a lot of us are right now, nurses are not, in a place where like we've been hit, right? We've all been hit, and we're like, what am I going to do now? And so I related, there's an amazing book called Finding Your North Star by Martha Beck. And I post a lot of my stuff around that, because she talks about being thrust back into square one of life. And I think a lot of us are in square one, and we want to go from square one to back to where we were. We're like, I don't want to go through this. Everything that's happening right now is messy. It's confusing. It's painful. I don't want to go through this. There's grief, there's loss, there's sadness, there's pain. So we want to go from this place that we've been thrown back into purposefully, back to where we were. And so I think that square one is where we do the work. It's like, you can't just go from, you can't just jump back in. If you do, something will happen and it'll throw you back. So, I mean, if you're not doing the work, then you will eventually find yourself really struggling again. It is absolutely, it's kind of non-negotiable. You can't create your life in whatever way that you want it to look, if to be, fulfilling and exciting and passionate. You can't find that if you're not willing to do the work. And the work is the hard part, really. It's the self-work. I think becoming an entrepreneur is the quickest route to self-growth and development, because it forces you to do, otherwise your business will fail, right? If you're not doing the work, your business is not going to succeed. So, yeah, I think you before asked me like to paint a picture of what it's like now. And so making that choice to leave was really difficult, but it was the best thing I could have done, because it's unraveled so many pieces over the last couple of years. And when I decided to really start focusing on nurses, although again, it was scary, it has allowed me to really put that moral distress I felt as a nurse to bed, because now I am able to show up for people in the way that I believe is best. It's not for everyone, maybe not, right? Like my solution is not the solution for everyone, but there are a lot of people who will benefit from the solutions that I have found. And I get to show up. I get to literally sit on calls, and I say to myself before I do anything, I am the gift here. And that's hard, because, with all the like that's confronting to a lot of people, right? Like to say things like that about ourselves, but it's taken me a lot of work to come to this place. But I have to go into my spaces like that, knowing that I have something to give these people. And if I am clouded by my doubt, then I won't show up in the most authentic way. So, and I really truly believe that for all of us, that we are the gift. And I'll just share, I wrote a children's book, and it's officially for sale, which is, I haven't launched it yet just because I'm so busy, but it's called The Perfect Snowflake. And it's about people embracing their uniqueness. It's written for children because, kids have these doubts about themselves too, but it, I think, is so applicable to everybody, of just embracing who we are and knowing that we are here for a reason, like that our authenticness, is that a word? The ability to be authentic is our gift, is like the reason that we're here in this world. And so how we show up, it doesn't matter what we do. It's who we are when we do it. It's how we show up in everything that we do. It's the little pieces of what are just to be figured out along the way.
I love it. You are the gift. We are the gift. And we'll put the link to the book in the show notes as well. So, it's interesting because I'm seeing some of our live listeners who are not in the field of nursing, but they're chatting about, hey, they're in the tech industry, they're in advertising, they're in other fields. And they're like, wow, this is still really resonating because a lot of these things are happening in other industries as well. While the picture looks a little bit different, people are really facing this burnout. And I'm curious, share with us a little bit of maybe just a few of your top tips or suggestions. I know you have so many that you're helping nurses with, to start ending burnout, start reprioritizing their health and well-being. But just give us a glimpse into anything for anyone who's listening today who can say, okay, at least here's something I can start with right now to maybe make a change.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about this because there's so many pieces, and I'm like, which I think probably the number one that it comes down to prioritizing ourselves. But we won't prioritize ourselves if we don't believe we're worth it. And there's two most common, limiting beliefs that women hold in particular, is that we're not worthy, and that we're failures. And so those are our fears as well. And so it's like, prioritizing yourself, although it sounds great, it's like, yeah, I want to do that. It sounds like something that would really benefit me. To come to a place where you can prioritize yourself is a whole nother story. And so it's tricky to come up with a step that people will actually follow, because the people that I work with generally they're in such a dark place that anything feels impossible, right? So if I said, I have a group that I'm working with right now. We had our first call last week, and we talked about stress, and we talked about what are some things that you could do, and everybody makes a plan. But at the same time, it's like, they're not feeling super confident that they'll be able to do it. Because when you're so overwhelmed, and I mean, you've specifically coached me through the same thing, like where you're so overwhelmed that you just can't possibly add anything else to your plate. And so I encourage people, I call it like leaning into your yes. And it's making a list. So making a list of things that make you feel good. And when I first did this, it was like, I had like 3 or 4 things. I really didn't know. I had no idea what was good for me because I hadn't done it in so long. But I started with that list, and now I could write 50 things on my list because I've explored and I've done it. And so I encourage people to just at least once a day do something that makes you feel good. It might just be sitting, and breathing with your eyes closed for 30 seconds. Like, it might be setting your table. It might be hugging your children. It might be reading a book. It could, there's so many things. And it could just be like taking your shoes off in the grass and just, and standing there in the grass. It seems so simple, but it feels good. So everybody will have a different list, but I encourage everyone to make a list and to put it somewhere where you can see it. So maybe it's like on your fridge, because, when we're feeling stressed, we often go to the fridge or the cupboard to look for something to hide and turn down the stress response. So maybe you put it there, and there's this ability to pause. The power of the pause is so, I see it and I teach it a lot because I feel like it's this opportunity, because so many of things that we do are habitual, and we turn to these old patterns that are they're so ingrained in us. And definitely when it comes to difficult or heavy or overwhelming emotions, we have these habitual responses to try to turn it down and to hide from it. And so I like the idea of putting the list somewhere where you go. So if you turn to wine, put your list or a little sticky on your wine. I'm going to say box, because that's what I used to drink, was a wine box. So I'd put my sticky there. So it just for a moment has you pause and say, like, maybe could I do one of these things instead? Like, just for that. Sometimes you'll still pour the glass of wine and say, forget the list. But sometimes you might feel empowered enough to say, oh, maybe I could just go outside for a few minutes instead of having this drink right now. And I tell, I would encourage, like, if there's something in your car, like you could put a sticky in your car, or maybe on your phone, if like scrolling Facebook and Instagram is your hiding mechanism. Like there's some way to trigger you to do one of those things. So make the list and then put it in places where you can see it, that will trigger you, just to pause for that moment to question yourself. Like, is this the best choice for me? Is this what I really want? The hardest part is listening, right? Because most of the time the true response is going to be no, like the wine is not the best choice. You should maybe go for a walk. But the harder part is listening to that, because it also means that we have to tune into what's going on inside, which would lead me to my number 2 top tip. Anything that has any training, any program I've ever taken, which has been a lot, that has to do with mental and emotional health. The number 1 piece is meditation and mindfulness. I mean, we can't leave that out. I know I said this before, but this is it's kind of a non-negotiable. Like, if you want to heal yourself mentally and emotionally, and physically for that matter, you have to be willing to listen to yourself. And it's not easy for a lot of people, because it's a lot of mess inside. And when we stop and be quiet, it's scary and it's overwhelming. So, I don't try to paint a picture of like, this Zenful meditation where like, you have all the crystals and the candles, which is beautiful if you get to that place. But for the most part, people just need to stop. People just need to find some way to pause for a few moments, maybe throughout the day, or maybe just even once a day, if that's the beginning point for them. I took this really amazing meditation retreat a few years ago. And just, there were so many takeaways from that. But one thing she said was that there's no such thing as a bad meditation. And so I want people to know that, because we have these expectations, right? That we're going to have all these insights and all these like beautiful aha moments. And we're going to just walk away with like all this clarity and just all this Zen to take. And it just is not like that. Sometimes I'm sitting there like, I will come out and I'll like check my phone, like how many minutes do I have left here? Because it's just, there's so much going on inside of you. But I think it's so critical for us to spend those few moments quiet with your eyes closed, just listening to what's going on inside of you. And there is so many resources out there for meditation. Like there's so many, right? And you can explore different apps or YouTube or whatever. But even if you don't get to that point, even if you just sit with your eyes closed for 5 minutes, and the number 1 thing that you can draw yourself to bring you out of like those thought spirals or anything else. Like, sometimes we're just like, oh, I got to do this. Like, oh crap, I forgot to do this. And like, your mind's going a mile a minute, is to come back to your breath. Every time you catch yourself on one of those thought trains, it's like, okay, there I went, but I'm coming back, and come back to your breath and just listen to your breath, just feel your breath and just slow your breath. And you will get drawn away multiple times. And that's normal, because a lot of people say like, I can't meditate because I can't turn my thoughts off. Like, well, who can? I don't think anyone. Unless you get into a really deep meditation, which takes practice, then you can have those moments where like you're just completely sort of absolved and you don't have any of these thought spirals. But most of us will have that. Most of us sit in meditation and get squirreled away, and then we come back, and then get squirreled away, and then we come back. So it's that message, there's no such thing as a bad meditation, is really something that that I try to impart to people, but also that I come back to myself with too. And then I'll say like the third piece is support. I cannot say enough how critical it is for us to find support. Maybe it's in community, which I think is ultimately the best way, in supportive, like-minded community. Or maybe it's just with a trusted friend, maybe it's a trusted family member, but somebody who you can trust with your story, who you can trust with your emotions, who will just hold space for you without having to fix you, without having to give you all sorts of solutions, but just able to be with you in the experience that you're having. Which I know not everybody has. Some of us have beautiful support networks, and I'm so almost envious of that, because I think it's such a gift. But if you don't, then you have to go find it. And there is lots of places out there where we can find it, and which is a part of what I do on Facebook, there's a group, right? So it's called Surviving Nursing. And there's lots of nurses in there. Most of them are Canadian, but there are some from, and it's open to anybody, but it's about creating a safe space, and which is difficult to do in an online way. But what I also do in my program is it's a group program as well as one-on-one. And it is so about creating that safe container of community and support. And what I love watching in these women is that, like, usually around week 3 or 4, I start to see like them dropping their armor, like the swords are being laid down. It's like, okay, maybe I can kind of be me here. Like maybe this is safe. And when I was in a group program, personally, I noticed for myself, like just how much that was a pillar for me every single week, of knowing that this is a safe place. I can come, I can be me. No one's going to judge me. No one's going to try to fix me in any ways, that I just get to be me. And sometimes I would cry, which I do a lot. Sometimes I was mad. Sometimes I was like, just in a really ugly space and just wanting to, and it was all welcome. And so I try to create that for nurses, because most of us don't have it. And especially what I find, just because this is my expertise, but in this profession, is there's so much fear around speaking up and talking about how you're feeling, that I really strive to create that safe place for people to be themselves and to share their story in whatever flavor it comes, because it's different. It's different every day. So find support, find community. If you ask me for only one thing, I would say that is the most important, is to find support. I think we live in a world where we're expected to do it on our own, right? Like that if you need help, then there's something wrong with you that you can't figure out all this stuff on your own, that you can't raise 3 kids and run a business and do this and have this and that. Like if you can't do it all, it's your fault. It's not all the things, it's your fault. There's something wrong with you. And that happens in nursing all the time. Is like, we're struggling because we're like, I can't manage all of this. And it's not the system's fault. It's something that's personally wrong with you. It's some kind of personal failure. And so I think when we realize that we are meant to be in community, we are meant to be connected with other people, and we find that connection, you'll find yourself in a place where, like, I don't know how I survived without this. And I say that to myself all the time. I don't know how I survived without support all those years. But the thing is I was just merely surviving all those years. I was not thriving. You want to thrive, you find community, you find support.
I love that. What you want to thrive, you've got to find community and support. And that's exactly what you're doing, is creating that community and support for people. I know you kind of touched on this. You have your group that people can connect with. You have the one-on-one coaching, the group coaching. Say a little bit more about that, because I really do think, like, is there anything else we need to know? We'll put some links below in the show notes for people who are listening today, who are nurses, who are like, okay, I need that support. But I just wanted to touch on that as well.
Yeah. So the Facebook group is called Surviving Nursing. And you can just find it. It's a private group, but so you'll have to apply to get in, which really just means answer the question, so I know you're a real person, and not somebody trying to sell us test results, because that happens all the time. So I'm sure you get it too in your Facebook world. But so that's probably the first way that people will access me. And then, like, Facebook is a big resource as far as how I connect with people. So I also have a Facebook page, Sandra Payne Wellness. It's also on Instagram. And then the podcast as well. It's been kind of on hold this summer, but it's called End the Silence. And so you can go listen to those episodes. And then there's ways to link with me through there. And then my website is, you can find me at sandrapaynecoach.com. And on there, it talks all about, it talks about the podcast, talks about me and my story, but also about the Nurse RX program, which if there's like a number one thing I've pulled from all of my nursing jobs is program development, something that I will brag I'm quite good at. And people, not a lot of people here will understand the brag reference there, but program development is something that I really do. I am really good at. So I've created this program. It's for 12 weeks, and the nurses, it's a small group, and we move through those 12 weeks together as a group. They also get some one-on-one with me too, so we can just dive deeper into some of their individual challenges and create action plans around that. But the group is about, there's learning and, learning different tools and exercises and practices. but there's also the support. And like I said, if there's one thing that people really need is to build that community of support. And I watched these women over the 12 weeks, and even still this is my fourth group of nurses that have run through this program. And I still, even in the beginning, I'm like, is it going to work? Like there's all this doubt, but every single one at the end of the 12 weeks is always glowing with how good it feels to be a part of this network. And many of them continue on with me. There's nurses that I've been working with for the entire year since last year, who that they don't want to leave, because there's this beautiful sisterhood that has been created there. And they know that there's this place that they can show up every single week and get support and be heard, and support others, which is also something that we really thrive on, is helping other people. So, yeah.
You're doing such great, important work in the world. I'm so glad that we've had this conversation today and got to hear a little bit more about your story and really what you're up to and how you're helping change the lives of nurses. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to switch gears now and go to our Coaches Talk Back time, where our live listeners are joining us for this podcast recording. This is an awesome opportunity for all of our coaches out there at the IAWP to connect with Sandra, ask any questions that they have, whether it's about burnout, whether it's about the field of nursing, whether it's about what she's up to in her practice today. So we'll go ahead. We'll take questions now. Let's go over to Carrie.
Thank you, Suzanne, for taking me. I know it's your hour's wrapping up. You probably want to wind up, but I'm like tearing up over here, Sandra, because it's just hit me right between the eyes. And I'm going to get emotional too, because I'm a pharmacist. So I'm kind of in that medical field. We get them after you. And the pharmacy it's insane right now. Bad. It's real bad. It's getting worse and worse. And anyway, I've gone down to part-time. And so I guess my question to you, just, taking that leap, it was making me cry, just because, there is incredible fear there, with like leaving this profession that you're right, I'm so grateful for. It has been so good to me, this profession, but it's been such a stress on my internal integrity, like you talk about the more work you do on on yourself. And it's like, I've been on this journey literally, Suzanne, since I saw your video. I mean, that wrecked me, girl. I was in the bathroom at CVS crying, watching your video about, standing in the line at Starbucks or your coffee shop. And there's got to be something more, because it's like, I don't even take Tylenol when I get a headache, kind of thing, So it was a light bulb moment for me when I realized that pharmacy it's going in and day out, week in and week out, of something that's going against my set of values. Not that there's totally a place for Western medicine. Of course there is. But just kind of, anyway, just taking that jump. I mean, and did you go all in? Because I feel like I'm so timid here to I'm like, yesterday I worked. It was insane in there. And I'm just going, why am I even doing this? I'm at this cusp of trying to do this new health and wellness and really making a difference in that. But it's so scary. It's so scary to leave the comfort of those benefits, of leaving that, something that you've done for so long. So, did you take that jump, or did you kind of just do the gray zone there for a minute, just anyway, what was your kind of comment on that?
Yeah, it's, thank you for sharing. I'm just listening to you and feeling all my same feels as you went, but, I went the gray zone for a while, for sure. I haven't given up my license. But I am prepared to, and especially everything that's going on right now with our college here. So I still worked casual. I gave up my permanent job. I worked casual. And I was just like, I'll pick up where I can. But with the priority being, I'm trying to build this business and I have a family. And So I made it on my own terms, which was really nice. I said, like, I don't want to do this part of the work. I want to do this part. And they were so desperate that they took what I could offer, which is kind of a gift. And then since probably the last year, I haven't picked up at all in probably at least a year. So as my business grew, I realized it was so misaligned for me. And I just remember one shift going in as a casual, and I was in this room with the patient and the doctor was just like, didn't want to listen to what the patient was saying. And the patient was just had questions about the medication. The doctor was just like, take this, like just throwing it down his throat. And I had a panic attack. I was observing, because I was just returning back to that role in the heart failure program. And I had a panic attack, and I was like, I can't do this. Like this is so wrong. And I was sick to my stomach, and I have not picked up in that field. I just did my own thing, like that I felt really good about, in that program. So that was a long-winded answer, but I guess it was like, you'll find your way. And it was scary. Like, there was not moments where I was like totally confident that this was the right choice. And there still is times. And then people will say to me like, oh, don't give up your license because you're going to need that someday. And I'm like, no, stop putting that in my head, because it's like, actually, I think it's preventing me from moving forward, because it's like, well, I might need this. Like when I don't succeed, at least I have this to fall back on. Right. And so it's taken me so it'll be 2.5 years when my license is up, again. And so it hasn't been something I just was like, I'm done with nursing. I'm like done. I'm moving into coaching, and I'm going all in, because there's a lot of fear to letting go of that foundation, right, that we have created.
Yeah. Well, you're obviously doing, honestly, it's mirroring back to me, honestly, that I'm heading in the right direction, because it is obvious that you're where you need to be, so it's almost like a mirror to me, like, just like you said, just living, what'd you say? I have my notes, but living the authentic, if I could just be authentic to myself and true to myself, then I'm going to end up in the right place. So thank you so much. Mm-hmm. It's been a wonderful call, y'all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question, Carrie. And I'll just mention there too, it's like, people, there's always like kind of two options. One, you totally go cold turkey, or you kind of take this stepping path. And even myself, I kind of took this stepping path, right? I knew that I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore, but then I had to kind of start building my plan, right? And it's hard, because when you're in that gray zone, as you both called it, you're like, I know where I'm going, I'm committed, but I'm still not quite fully there, right? And I love, you said, just being authentic to yourself. And part of it is authentic to yourself right now, is I am in that gray zone, right? But you're moving forward. And I think that's the key thing, is to always be like taking those next steps so that you're on the path, you feel that momentum. And sure enough, you will get to where you want to be. I'm so glad that you shared today. Let's go over to Asia now. Hey, Asia.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for also being so honest and authentic with you can feel it. I'm sure everyone could feel that listening. I just want to say what you said about how, when you go into your coaching clients and you have to kind of go in with the, I am the gift. And then immediately it was like, I know that's really hard for some people to say, but even that too, that lesson, I'm not a nurse. I don't have any nursing background, but my background, I've always been a support system. I've always had to give. I come from a design background, and it's very like life force giving all the time. And in advertising, having to just give ideas and constantly have that sucked out of you. So a lot of what I've been working with too is burnout. And my practice coaches are like young designers and artists. And the first thing that I even ask too is like, how much are you sleeping? Like, those little things. And so what you're saying, I think resonates across so many vocations for what also just, I'm a mom. And so one of the biggest things I have to teach my kids going through school is I have young, like preteens and a teenager is, having that self-worth and without it being production. So like without having to, you're not dividing like that you're only worthy when you're producing something, when you're getting good grades, when you're looking a certain way. It's like, or when you're giving so much to other people. This was a really great reminder that it's what being the gift and owning that is how we can make a difference, because that's how you're making a difference. And that's, if I can just be really honest with making sure I'm taking care of myself and who I am, and be able to show that for my clients and my kids, then I may not be changing, all the nurses' lives, but I think that just, it's a good reminder that being ourselves makes a difference and owning it. So thank you so much. I'm going to read those books.
Yeah. I'm always referencing books. My clients laugh every time I'm like, there's a book, because I'm always calling books, but there's another book I'll mention, is called Burnout. And maybe some of you have read it, but it's Amelia and Emily Nagoski, I believe, are the authors. And it talks about, they call it human giver syndrome, which I really resonated with, and I think it's so ingrained in women in particular, because, it's how we were brought up. And we were literally, it's in the air we breathe, that it's like, it's our job to give. And, I have burnt out in this role. I'll be very honest. As a coach, I have, over the summer, I experienced my own burnout again. But what I found is that you catch it quicker. And like back then, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the support, nothing to help me through that. And so this time though, when I noticed it, like I noticed I was getting really miserable. I noticed I was really tired all the time. I noticed that my body was telling me all these things. And I was able to, with the support that I found and with the tools and everything that I have learned, I was able to course correct, which means letting go of stuff. It means reprioritizing. It means delegating. It means like coming back to those practices, right? The yoga, the meditation, the journaling, all the pieces, because it's slippery. Like they're not things that we've been necessarily, most of us, taught to do on a regular basis, like brushing our teeth, right? So it's really slippery that those things can be let go of. But I find that with the nurses I work with, and I think it could go for anyone, is just the more you do this kind of work for yourself, the quicker it is. I think it's lifelong, this journey of self-growth and discovery. But I think the more you do it, the quicker you can catch when you get off course, and you can pull yourself back, especially when you have all these systems in place to support you, to get you back there. Thank you for sharing that. I think, and even just the kids part too. It's
100%. I mean, what you're saying is, it's like, it's not just, this is the last thing I'll say. It's not just like teaching your kids when you burn out, this is how you fix it. And then you can go back to like getting the same thing. It's actually like a real lifestyle. It's like little things every single day, even if it's the mindfulness that you're talking about, if it's like not doing anything but just washing the dishes, or those like little daily things. That's what I'm trying to teach my daughters, because like you said, things that we're taught just coming up, especially from my experience as a woman, was very much production based, very much how other people view me, and appeasing, society, work, people, all of that. So that's like the best reminder too, is just what you're saying, is that I've also experienced repeat burnout. So it's like, it doesn't stop but fixing it quicker by like taking a quick shower, or those little things, the daily practice stuff. So thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne, for having her on, because she's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Ava.
There's another thing we practice too, and it's like receiving compliments. And so, when someone compliments you, you're like, ugh. So it's, instead you lean in and you're just like, thank you. It's true. I am awesome. It's so awkward, but it's like, it's about building self-love. It's like, we have to be able to take that stuff too. Yeah. Thank you. I'm just like Anyways, I know we're over to Suzanne.
Well, I just want to say maybe that is a great place to end. You are awesome, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining me today on Live Well, Dream Big. And thank you to everybody listening in and joining in on this conversation. I look forward to our next one. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.